Hey, yo. Welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy, podcast where two mental health professionals talk about their mental health journeys and how they navigate mental wellness while working in the mental health field. I'm your host, Jeremy Schumacher, licensed marriage and family therapist. In order to protect my own mental health and that of my guests, I am recording a bunch of solo episodes for the month of December, as opposed to trying to navigate holiday scheduling and that of my guests and people having colds and people's kids getting sick and it just generally being a busy time of year. So today I wanted to talk about a religious trauma year-end wrap-up, but really I wanted to sort of look at why right-wingers are finding religion. And you're like, hang on, Jer, aren't right-wingers the religious ones already? And yes, you are correct in that. And so rather than doing a year-end wrap-up, I guess I want to look at, like, is the right wing okay? Because they should be happy, but they seem to be worse than ever. What's up with that? And why are they all in a tiz and in a crisis and trying to rediscover religion and or recreate religion when they got their guy in power? For those of you not watching this podcast on YouTube, which, to be fair, usually the YouTube is just an animated therapy office on loop. I shrugged there. What's going on? Yeah, I mean, so to be clear, this is not a political podcast, although oftentimes I do talk about political topics because mental health is political, and vice versa, right? Well, not vice versa. Mental health is political. Politics keep affecting mental health in the sense that legislation to harm people's mental health and also just late-stage capitalism and systemic injustice and systemic injury and moral injury and just late-stage capitalism ruining everybody's life unless you are a capitalist who has made out like mad and has now turned to religion because you're afraid of dying and going to hell. Maybe. I don't know. Let's jump in. What am I talking about? If you don't follow religious trauma as just like a headline, you might not know what I'm talking about. And if you have any good, healthy boundaries about your internet engagement, you're certainly not following what Joe Rogan or Peter Thiel are doing. And yet, here I am, your friendly neighborhood therapist, coming to talk to you about these things. In fairness to year-end wrap-ups that are trendy right now, I mean, Project 2025, a bunch of it got done, right? The Republicans won the House and the Senate and the White House and did a bunch of their Christo-fascist bullshit. And it was always the platform that Trump was running on. Even when he distanced himself from it, it was what he was running on. A 900-page document showing what they want to do. There's lots of places that track how much of it is done. I think on the low end, most places show at least like 40% of it got done. I tend to look a little higher than that. I do think they did a lot of it through Doge. They did a lot of it through some of the backdoor channels of things that aren't headline flashy. There are policy wonks, and I don't know why that's a term. If that's like offensive somehow, I'm unfamiliar. I just hear other pundits use it. There are people who do the ins and outs of policy often. And those folks are Stephen Miller is one of them, but certainly some of the lame charisma vacuums, which Stephen Miller is. The people behind the Heritage Foundation, in the Heritage Foundation, the people telling the Supreme Court what to think, are those policy nerds, the Paul Weyrichs of the world. Paul Weyrich was one of the engineers of the moral majority during the Reagan years. He's the one who shifted the right wing's talking points to be about abortion and to make abortion not a religious topic, but a political one. So I'm more versed in some of the how we got here than who's currently at the Heritage Foundation now doing stuff. But like they're there again. These are the people who are given cabinet positions, who were the authors of Project 2025. These are the people who are taking over colleges, who are being put on boards in different places. Like they're out there. You can find them. Um, and yeah, so they've been pretty successful in getting things done, although the Trump administration seems to be headed for lame duck territory sooner rather than later, even 1 year into the this 4 year. He's not going to live that long, but like um, it's not a threat. He's just an old man who very clearly has a worsening dementia, and but yeah, it's not going to probably keep the House if we have anything that even resembles elections. Nothing's going to go well there. Republicans keep retiring from the House because they don't want to support pedophiles, but they have supported a pedophile for a long time. So they're also anyway. Trump's going to be lame duck in the midterms, certainly when he loses control of the House. But like he's not getting anything done. A lot of the things that they did do in Project 2025 have been successful because they just did it, and there was no enforcement mechanism to stop what was unconstitutional and or illegal. And so a lot of things bogged down. They did certainly try to use the move fast and break stuff strategy, which again was successful for a while, is bogging down now, and I think will continue to bog down. I hate trying to prognosticate politics in the future because you hate to be wrong, but also like I don't know, we shouldn't even be here, and yet we are. So but what they have been successful in is shifting policy talk, and I would argue the Overton window, the cultural norming of white supremacy and bigotry. Certainly, where trans rights were a few years ago is not where they are now. We've lost women's reproductive rights. We've lost lots of protections for people who are not from here or who are from here but have different skin color than white supremacists would like people to have. So yeah, like a lot's been done, and if you're somebody who struggles with religious trauma, like that sort of creeping dread of like feeling like you're in a church, like there's this authoritarian regime that you're on the outside looking in because the group that is in charge doesn't like you. If you experience any of that, like your nervous system probably doesn't like what's going on now, and that's probably accurate. Again, this has been geared towards fascism. It's been geared towards a theocracy. That is what the religious right wants, and there's not a real perceptible difference between the religious right and the right wing at all. So yeah, that's been bad writ large. Now, what has been happening that I think is odd, that is of interest, of note to talk about here, is while Project 2025 has been successful in integrating a lot of its policies, it's still deeply unpopular, right? And so a lot of these things are happening, and the rich people are getting richer. That's the Republican platform. That's what they wanted to happen, and that is what is very successfully happening, right? The transfer of wealth from lower class and people to the ultra wealthy continues to happen at a rapid pace. And so that has been a resounding success for the party that supports billionaires. The billionaires, though, are seeing everything else collapse and are getting nervous. And sometimes when people get nervous, when there is things that happen outside of our control that make us question how much we can control, oftentimes people turn to superstition to explain those things. And so we're seeing some pretty big media names. We're seeing some pretty big right-wing folks take some weird turns. Now, this is not a media, a policy thing. I do think media literacy is mental health, certainly. And so, Tucker Carlson's always been weird and odd, and I would argue not a healthy person, and certainly not somebody we should be taking advice from or platform. But like, yeah, Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes on Milo Yiannopoulos is back in the right wing sphere. Like the right wing's not okay, to answer the title of this episode. And they haven't been for a while. Like, again, Andrew Tate got brought over when people fleeing persecution cannot get refugee status, cannot get asylum here. We got Andrew Tate to come here while he was being charged with sexual exploitation and prostitution in a different country. So, that's not okay. And like, I know better than this, and I would like the world to be a simple place. I would like to be able to say, if you voted for Donald Trump in 2024, you are a bad person. And to a wide degree, I think that's a defensible position. But I know there's nuance there. I do hold logical, theoretical space that there are a lot of people who have been brainwashed, who have been subject to years and years of propaganda, who are not well enough resourced to know better. And I can hold space for that, right? Like, I can hold space for there are people who bristle at being called a white supremacist because they voted for Trump. And, I think if you are on the same team as the white supremacists, you do need to reflect on what is that about for you personally. You may bristle at being called a white supremacist, but if the white supremacists voted for the same person that you did 3 times in a row, like, that cognitive dissonance requires more work on your part. It doesn't require everyone else to explain it to you, and it certainly doesn't require people to stop saying you're lumped in with the white supremacist. That makes you white supremacist. Being a white supremacist isn't a deal breaker. That's a you problem. But no, I do hold space because I spent a lot of time in the church myself as a well-educated and clever human. Because I see people come out of religion who have been indoctrinated and heavily manipulated, have been coerced, have been mind controlled into making decisions that were not in their best interest. So I'm aware of the propaganda machine. I'm aware of the brain rot and the intentional erosion of education and critical thinking skills across this country and others. The paradox of being ADHD, I think, is my ADHD brain can chew on and live in that gray space and really appreciate all the nuance that everything has. And the whether it's an oversimplification to say ADHD brain and autism brain, but the more autistic side, the perhaps more rigid thinking side of my brain that likes the black and white thinking wants to be like, nah, she's a bad person. It's a weird place to be in my brain, but also a weird time to be alive when convicted felon whose decades-long friendship with the most famous pedophile on the planet wasn't disqualifying. Anyways, Trump has, as predicted, crashed the economy, and things are getting worse, and things will continue to get worse because his economic policies are a disaster. And the backbone of the right wing is to protect the wealthy ruling class. So again, that is working, but it is becoming increasingly unpopular. And while a bailout to farmers will keep things intact and limping along in a way that like a Democrat would do, because we don't have a leftist party in America, the problems will persist and continue to get worse because canceling his own policies doesn't necessarily get us back to a healthy point. The damage is being done and will continue to be done. So the people who have invested heavily in this, Joe Rogan, Peter Thiel, people who have invested heavily and gotten wealthy off of the right-wing grift and the right-wing political machine, are panicking because they need to control the narrative, because the day in and day out of regular people is worse under Trump than it was. And kitchen table politics tends to be a pretty predominant ruler over anything else. The propaganda machine is in full force. And if you can't afford your groceries, it doesn't matter what your favorite podcaster tells us. To a degree, right? There's some degree of population that will bury their heads in the sand and not confront reality, and will turn specifically away from reality because their propaganda is more comfortable for them. And those people are being mind controlled, right? Like, that's when we say mind control, we don't mean MK Ultra, hypnotism. We mean brainwashing and years and years of misinformation leading to a inhibited critical thinking skills part of our brain that could engage in higher level executive functioning being severely underdeveloped and or inhibited and possibly injured if we're talking about the older generation who slathered everything in lead paint and huffed diesel gasoline, and or just has brain deterioration because they're old. But yeah, let's talk specifically 15 minutes in here. There's a long preamble. So anyway, yeah, the right wing's not okay and hasn't been. Again, Tucker Carlson has always been weird and full of like awful rhetorical procedures for just asking questions as a rhetorical device, and his show is brain rot to consume. He's a very stupid person. And like a Nepo baby and awful person. But even he has, again, like talking to Milo Yiannopoulos and platforming Nick Fuentes, who is like an out and out neo-Nazi, an open white supremacist. So again, the right wing's like not too great, but I think Tucker, since he left Fox News, has been like less popular and certainly has less sway in things. But I've seen a lot of discourse around that Nick Fuentes interview. It's weird, it's bizarre to watch, and I just have a hard time with watching something so stupid. He's not smart. Neither is Jordan Peterson. Like that's what dumb people think smart people like. And so again, if you like that thing and I am telling you that's what dumb people think smart people talk like, again, I'm not insulting you. I want you to sit with what that might mean for you and the cognitive dissonance. If you're saying I'm not dumb, but I do consume the media that the propagandists think is for dumb people. Just gonna let you sit with that for a sec. Not that I think right wingers are watching or listening to my show. So anyway, for you more progressive folks who tune in, hey, thanks. The quote I have from Joe Rogan here, which was, I try not to pay attention to Joe Rogan, right? A reality TV star in the White House is enough to pay attention to, but a reality TV star who is the most listened to podcast in the world is really disappointing for humanity to be at this point. But yeah, Rogan's like unhinged and brain dead and brain damaged and was a stupid person to begin with. The brain rot is pretty impressive, but he went on the American Alchemy podcast. I don't know what that is or what it's about or who it hosts, but Rogan said, quoting here, if Jesus does return, even if Jesus was a physical person in the past, you don't think that he could return as artificial intelligence. And then he added, as the conversation went on, artificial intelligence could absolutely return as Jesus. So again, this is where I'm like, man, it's hard to take anything he says seriously because this is so stupid. Apparently, artificial intelligence is returning as Jesus, not Jesus returning as artificial intelligence. I don't think Rogan knows Christianity, which again highlights to me that like this is a grift. That Rogan is a very stupid person, but he is media savvy enough to know that being MAGA and being pro-Trump is a losing strategy now. And so while he could sort of do the Tucker Carlson, oh, I don't know, I'm just asking questions. I invited everybody on my podcast. Only some of the right wingers came on. I don't know how that happened. Blah, blah, blah. He's been right wing for a while because he wanted to have a large payout in media and he wants no oversight to be able to say whatever he wants with no consequence, because that makes him more money and he doesn't want his money to be at risk. And like, if anything, that's a right wing ideology I can at least like understand and respect if people were honest about it. Like, I'm wealthy and so I'm right wing because it lets me be wealthier. It's not moral or ethical, but like it's understandable. I think it's the reality for most right wingers. Most right wingers who are at an influential place, whether that's a social media influencer or a person in power, I don't think very many of them are true believers. I think it is pragmatic grifting. But yeah, I mean, Rogan, is like dumb, and so he reads a lot. He doesn't. He skims things, and he has people tell them things. And I'm guessing he just like reads like AI summaries of things. But yeah, he wants to be like a free thinker, critical thinker. Look at my big brain. Don't ask me how many concussions I've had, kind of guy. And if Jesus does return, even if Jesus was a physical person in the past, like, man, that's close to raising a good point that would require further discussion if you were having an intellectual discussion, if you were willing to engage with this topic sincerely, even if Jesus was a physical person. But, well, actually, fun fact, current academic literature on that suggests that he wasn't. And the things that are being published and passing peer review and not just being churned out by religious publishing houses that have no standards for publishing other than that it is an author saying the things that they like, have suggested for the past decade or so now that it is more likely than not that Jesus did not exist. The historical Jesus, a real person living in Galilee 2,000 years ago, is unlikely to have existed. And I would say comfortably so, academia is at. Any sort of argument or pushback from that is from an apologetic stance, and it's been rebutted. And the studies that are out there suggesting that this is not a historical figure out there. So again, it's like he doesn't raise this point. I'm not giving him credit for raising an interesting point, but like he brings up something that if he were to engage with it sincerely would be worth talking about. He doesn't, because he's a moron, and he's not trying to engage real. But he is trying to, one, protect his moneymaker, which is the tech bros, because he needs podcasting to be successful, and AI could threaten him. So he's got to have his grift in, which is to be in good with the people who are going to control all the levers on the algorithms and our data tracking in the future and our surveillance state. If Jesus does return, you don't think he could return as artificial intelligence? And again, I'm going to ignore that he contradicted himself later because, again, I don't think he knows much about Christianity. I don't think he knows much about anything. He's a moron. And I say that as somebody who, like, according to society, is not a moron, and who engages with people on deep conversations regularly. And like, it's really hard to listen to Rogan because of how stupid he is. And whatever, like, libertarian older brother smoking weed in your garage you were attracted to like a decade ago, Rogan has gotten a lot worse. He isn't having smart people on his podcast to have interesting conversations anymore. He's having other grifters on his podcast to grift with him. So, like, I don't know what he was. I never understood the appeal because, again, he was an overtly stupid person always. Could I listen to Joe Rogan talk about UFC? Yes. I'm not particularly interested in UFC, but like I hold a lot of space for people to talk about the thing they have expertise in, right? I don't know much about UFC. I would listen to Joe Rogan explain why someone's kickboxing is better than someone else's, or why they should win a fight, or I would watch a Joe Rogan. I wouldn't, because I don't care about UFC, but like, could he have one of those YouTube channels that breaks down fights and does analysis? Sure. Like, he knows a lot about that. He got his big break hosting Fear Factor. I get that. That's why I refer to him as a reality TV star. But like, he also has spent a lot of time commentating on UFC, and I would assume knows a lot about it. I don't know much about it, so it sounds intelligent. And that's his bread and butter, right? Is talking about a lot of things that people aren't well informed on, and then having this faux sort of expertise come in. But this podcast isn't with an expert on either AI or religion. So this topic falls really flat. Like, the guy he's talking to, the podcast host, just sort of goes, like, because it's such a ludicrous statement, he wants to respond negatively, but it's Joe Rogan, so of course he won't. And then the guy brings up Tesla, which is a real thing, and then Transformers and Star Trek, which are fictional things, as like, wouldn't AI Jesus be cool? And it's like, well, Teslas are some of the least reliable cars on the road, and it's just like a meme stock. Like, they're not a meme. It's not a meme stock, but it's certainly overvalued, not based on anything. And so, yeah, like, that's a problem. So you're highlighting something that spectacularly in its last product launch failed the Cybertruck is still a laughing stock for anyone who sees it out on the road and watches videos of it not working the way that it's supposed to, which will not stop bringing me joy at this point in my life. And like nowhere close to making progress or selling more cars. We're not closer to self-driving or any of the other things that he talks about. So we have Tesla, which is a failing brand. We have which also, again, like his market for electric vehicles has been undermined by his grift to the right wing. Like, if anything, he was getting more of the Prius environmentally aware crowd, and like, right, he's alienated all of them. So whatever. That guy, this podcast went on to talk about, again, a Tesla, which is a real thing, but is failing, and two fictional things as examples of AI Jesus. And like, that's where we're at. We're talking about Star Trek and Transformers being real, and neither of those things are. And we're also talking about Jesus being real and also wasn't. And that's the overlap here, the conglomeration of like, we don't have data, we don't have evidence, our talking points aren't being borne out by reality. We can't say Trump will save the middle class. We can't say Trump will protect children. We can't say Trump will release the Epstein files. We can't say Trump will lower prices. We can't say any of those things because it's been a year and none of that has happened, and the opposite keeps happening. So we have to change tact, and because we can't live in reality, we have to venture into unreality, superstition, magical thinking, religion, right? Like, that's where we're at. And the other, example, this is a little bit of an older one, but one that I think is far more nefarious and that less people know about, which is Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel has bankrolled JD Vance's entire political his entire political career. Peter Thiel has made a bunch of money off of different venture capital around the internet and the dot-com bubble. He owns Palantir, which is getting a bunch of government contracts to spy on us. Like, we're just fully moving into the surveillance state. And again, for regular people, our lives will continue to get worse. But like, again, for the wealthy ruling class, it's been a pretty successful first year of a presidency, which is what they bought and paid for, right? Like, they want things to be unregulated so they can harm the environment, so they cannot owe money to regular people or investors or anything. They want deregulation so they can grift and get away with it. And Larry Ellison, is working on, he's bought Paramount. He's trying to bungle up the Netflix HBO deal so that, or Netflix Warner Brothers deal, so that he can buy that too. Because again, he owns a lot of AI data centers. And so while not owning AI, he's a huge investor in OpenAI, which is the ChatGPT company. And then he wants to control the narrative in these entertainment companies. So it's yes, shifting the Overton window and controlling the means of mass producing propaganda, which is the entertainment stuff. But I think it goes deeper than that, which is controlling the AI data centers and then controlling the media companies to start shoveling and funneling AI in. So it's just this printing money for him, basically, and his nefarious offspring, I assume. I don't know. Again, like, all these people also turn to religion because they're scared of dying, because the technology isn't real where they can upload their consciousness and live forever. And like everybody, they're dying. And like far too many people, they've never really accepted that fact. And so now they're scared because their money cannot buy them immortality. But Peter Thiel is a real life ghoul. I say that derisively. I don't know what is wrong with his face. I assume it's botched plastic surgery from being a wealthy person trying to look young and failing. He spent a lot of money on like weird stuff to stay young. He's gay, and like, I don't know, his partner fell out of a very tall window not that long ago. And I don't want to be conspiratorial, but that does happen in Russia a lot. As a way to get rid of people. And I don't know, again, like the real life stuff we know about Peter Thiel is he's just sort of a ghoul. He's an unpleasant, unhappy person. Again, if I had enough money to not work, like, you just wouldn't hear from me. And I'd be doing like whatever version of the Mackenzie Scott thing I could do, which is giving as much of it away as I can and then just reading books somewhere and growing plants, rescuing dogs, probably. I don't know. Like, we could be making sure kids aren't hungry, but we're giving lectures about the Antichrist instead. I don't understand rich people. But yes, Peter Thiel has been on a lecture tour, quote unquote. He's given several lectures that you had to like get tickets to, and he's been very sort of this sheen of academia around it. But again, he's just wealthy, so he's renting an auditorium to hear himself talk and making people pay for it. But he's been like on the Antichrist for a while, and now if you know anything about the right wing, Musk and Thiel, and making money off of PayPal, but then there was an early 2000s sort of right wing think tank that was online, which is Curtis Yarvin, where he sort of came in, and the Dark Enlightenment is what it is called. I think that's far too generous to make it a movement and to give it any sort of credibility. It's a bunch of dorks circle jerking on forums about how smart they are because they didn't actually ever read any real philosophers or smart people, and so they're just recreating things like religion, even though because they're not well read and they have no real world experience. They're just dorks, and so they think they're very smart and they like to navel gaze. But yeah, like Yarvin's writing is very stupid, and he talks in sort of this sci-fi language about these entities, and it's not the Foundation. That is actual sci-fi. That's Asimov. What am I thinking of? The cathedral, I believe, is Yarvin's big metaphor and analogy for all these evils. It's the academics and their big towers, and yeah, the cathedral. But yeah, they're tech fascists. They're technocrats. They want the tech bros to be the ruling class. And so there's some overlap between Musk and Yarvin and Thiel and JD Vance, who again is one bad cheeseburger away from being the president. So these things matter. I think Yarvin is probably some of the I don't want to say the brains, because again he seems to be quite stupid actually, but like is sort of the intellectual of the bunch. Musk is like, I think, accepted to be not smart at this point. Like whatever sort of Tony Stark aura he used to have, that has gone away by failing to launch the Cybertruck anything close to successfully, and also then being like very public with Doge and just using it to steal all of our data to feed to Grok, which is the Twitter AI, the XAI. Stupid timeline we're living in. Anyway, Peter Thiel is obsessed with the Antichrist and not dying himself, at looking like a vampire. And he thinks Greta Thunberg is the Antichrist because he thinks people who want to regulate AI or are concerned about climate change are pushing for a new world order, a one world government in which the Antichrist is wokeness. I don't think he says wokeness, but like the Antichrist is concerned about his perspective is rules and regulations. It's holding back progress is the Antichrist, and that would be people who want to preserve the environment. And so again, if you're really wealthy and you are heavily invested in tech, who is your bad guy? Right, people who want to regulate AI, people who are acknowledging that AI is incredibly damaging for the environment, and people who have empathy for other people. People who look around and say, hey, the wealthy business owners have never really made good ideas that are healthy for everyone else. They want to find out how much sawdust they can put in cereal and still get away with it, is how they use their money. That's a real thing. That's Kellogg's Corporation. So, yeah, from his perspective of wealthy fascist, yes, people who are pushing for regulations and care about climate change would be your Antichrist if you're a villain. If you're Lex Luthor, Superman's the worst, right? Truth, justice, and the American way. Which, like, I don't love that as a Superman slogan, but yes, if you're evil, truth and justice are bad. If you're a criminal, then transparency is bad. If you are taking bribes and buying your way into power, then transparency and regulations and rules limiting how much wealth you can exploit from people are bad. If you are ruining the environment for your own personal gain, then regulations that protect the environment are bad. And so his version of the Antichrist is laughably depthless. It is truly just, from Peter Thiel's mind, what limits him making more money. Let's call that the Antichrist. And so it's taking, again, things that are devoid of any basis in reality, things that do not have backing from science, from research, from data, from evidence that we have, because we don't have any of those things that are solid. We're just turning into the magical thinking of religion because it allows for a space where we do not have critical thinking skills. Now, if that was all that was going on, I don't know that if I would have wanted to talk about it. Again, like Project 2025, there's a little bit of like realization and normalization that I want to do and say, like, if you feel worse off and you feel like more anxious or your nervous system is less aligned, like, that's correct. That's accurate. That is your system responding to threats that are being done very intentionally. Um, that was all part of Project 2025. It was demonizing the LGBTQ plus community, taking away people's rights, women's reproductive rights, ending no-fault divorce, and then demonizing Black and brown people and deporting them, often illegally. So yeah, that's been the plan. And Project 2025 is about like control through terror, and so is Project 2026. And so yeah. Anyway, yeah, but then we also recently have this student at Oklahoma State University, I believe it was OSU, who was supposed to write a paper about bullying related to gender, and instead wrote a 2-page paper about how God made male and females, and therefore bullying isn't a problem? Question mark. I did skim the essay, which is available online, and it's very poorly written. I taught several classes at the college level as an adjunct instructor, and yeah, it's poorly done. It's very, very poorly written. Nothing was cited. Even if you wanted to cite your personal belief, like cite scripture, quote a Bible passage, none of that happened. It was truly just like, I feel this, so I can put it in a paper and write that way. So it wasn't an academic paper. It didn't respond to the prompts, and that got the teacher put on hiatus, and like, there's a new Riley Gaines of like, why are we listening to a 5th place swimmer talk about anything? Why are we listening to a 20-year-old psych student who failed a pretty simple assignment? They're not sending their best because they don't have a best to send. So again, like, that just as a wrap up here to highlight, like, this is the real world application of, if you don't listen to Joe Rogan and you're not particularly interested in, I don't know, knowing why the CIA is a bad thing, and we've been villainous across our existence as a country, and you're not interested in the deep dives on who are the people pulling the strings or writing the think pieces that allow the people to pull the strings, that's fine. You don't need to know Curtis Yarvin's online personas, Mencius Moldbug, or any of those rabbit holes that I happen to be aware of. But this is chilling free speech. This is chilling scientific thought. This is chilling any sort of standards, all under the name of promoting Christofascism. Because again, we're not extending these freedoms or these protections to people from other religions. And so even if you're on team free religion, like, I would hope, and I'm laughing, I know why people don't see it this way, because if you're an evangelical Christian, this seems like a win for you because your team is winning. But again, what we're seeing is the right wing is falling apart. The rats are abandoning the ship, and they will start to eat each other. And there's going to be a reckoning. You can't build a theocracy because these Christofascists don't go to the same churches. they're not the same religion themselves. There's all these different sects. The thing that they're interested in is power. I quoted Margaret Bronson, who was on the podcast but does deconstruction doulas. She does a lot of great work. Said that white supremacy is the egg in the cake that Christian nationalists are baking. It is the ingredient that holds everything else together. For people who do not agree on other policies and do not believe in the same theocracy and do not worship at the same churches, the thing they have in common is white supremacy and its offshoot in America, which is power. And so, yeah, again, like if you're somebody who bristles at being called a white supremacist because you voted for Donald Trump, like, why are you voting for the same person as the white supremacists? If you find Nick Fuentes to be distasteful, why are you on the same side as him? And it's exhausting for people who are not on the same side as him to look at people who want to stay on the same side as him and say, but we're not. Christians are, right? Evangelicals are. Evangelicals voted for Trump. 80% of evangelicals voted for Trump 3 times in a row, right? Like it's beyond defensible. And so there is no reality to it. There is no backbone to it. There is no internal consistency. There is no evidence for it. And so we have to use magical thinking, which is why the right wing latched on to the religious right, because they're already prepped and trained for lacking critical thinking skills. They're already open to superstition and magical thinking. They are already open to doing things as a matter of faith without any proof or evidence. And so, again, I don't think Peter Thiel thinks Greta Thunberg is the antichrist. I think he's trying to control the narrative to maintain his wealth and power. I think Joe Rogan sees the writing on the wall and perhaps is somewhat good at the media landscape. And so as somebody who got his start in television, can shift and change with that. I don't think they're true believers. I'm skeptical that someone like Mike Johnson is a true believer. I think he is probably a white supremacist. And so, aligning with a church that backs that is probably accurate. Same with Hegseth, right? Doug Wilson is not Christian. But again, like Christianity and white supremacy are deeply tied. I don't think you can separate those things. So I'm not even trying to be like, not a real Christian. Like, no, Christianity is bad. You can't clean your own house of these racists and bigots, then you don't get to dictate morality for anyone else. Is my stance on that. And so I feel tired and defeated at the end of this episode, and that's not a fun way to end the year. But like, I do want to again like highlight that this is bad for people's mental health. Like fascism is bad for health and wellness. It's great for corporate interests who have invested in fascism. But it's not fun to live through for the rest of us. And if you are triggered by it, if your nervous system is on fire, if you are feeling hopeless, doom and gloom, burnt out on it all, like, yeah, I think that's realistic. I don't know that that's helpful to stay there. I don't think it's good to stay burnt out. I don't think it's good to stay doom and gloom. Again, I think I've said this in other places, like in team collapse, when something that is unhealthy finally kicks the bucket and decomposes, then something else can grow in that place. And that's actual biology. But if you want to be fancy, you can talk about a phoenix rising from the ashes or whatever. Like, do I think America is going to cease to exist? No. Do I think I want America to limp along in the late stage capitalist hellscape that it is? Like, no. Better things are certainly available. So I'm a cynical optimist. I believe good things could happen. I am skeptical that they will until we see evidence of it. But, maybe that collapse has been hastened by all this fuckery. One can hope. That's what I got. If you can hear the tiredness in my voice, then you have learned and it has been successfully normalized that this is bad for our mental wellness. Go to therapy. Your therapist is seeing a therapist because they need it. It's the whole trick with this podcast. And so you also should go to therapy. All right. If you're feeling super burned out and have to live in a late stage capitalistic hellscape like I do, and you want to gather with like-minded folks who are burnt out, and especially if you're a neurodivergent friend, I am running a retreat in February in Southwest Wisconsin. I don't know how west it is. Outside, it's about 90 minutes from Milwaukee, 90 minutes from Madison. I'll be hosting a retreat in Princeton, Wisconsin. Details up on my website about that. It's called Burnout to Boundaries, and it is neurodivergent friendly. And Princeton, Wisconsin, while being a small town in Wisconsin, is actually working on building a really progressive, safe, small town community environment there. And so, yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff there. So if this stuff bums you out, same. And if you want to gather in community, head over to my website, or we'll put it in the show notes, drop in the show notes, and check that out. And we'll be back in the new year with more guests and hopefully more uplifting stuff. That is what I want to talk about and what I like to do. And to protect my time and energy, we'll have a few more solo episodes. Take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. Peace.